Last week, I was at EWTN studios in Alabama, where I participated in a very special virtual book signing for my new picture book, The Thief Who Stole Heaven. It was hosted by our own Doug Keck. I so enjoyed taking your calls and hearing from you all. Tonight, I wanted to bring you a few highlights from that special broadcast. Take a look.
We're doing something a little bit different, so we're going to be taking phone calls. You'll be autographing books for people, right?
With the COVID thing, I can't go to bookstores. I would normally travel around the country, go to bookstores. So we thought, wouldn't it be nice to bring the book signing experience to the entire EWTN family? So we'll take calls, I'll personalize your books, and you can order them at the EWTN Religious Catalog.
Right, EWTNRC.com, 1-800-854-6316. You can also ask for its item number 2388A. So if you haven't gotten your copy yet, you go to the special website so you'll get an autographed copy.
It's the backstory, the origin story of the good thief. I mean, we all know the good thief, but we often kind of box him away after Good Friday and put him up on a shelf. Nobody thinks about the good thief anymore. I stumbled across this story, which is the origin story, the backstory of Dismas, the good thief, and I thought, this would make a great family read for families to share together, explore together. So we decided to create a picture book surrounding it. But it's more than, you know, I get a little antsy when people say, oh, this is a children's book. It's not a children's book. It's a family read. It's for kids, it's for adults.
Speaking of families, I think we've got our first call on the line. A couple of your fans, Lindsay and Leah from Illinois. Are you there?
Uh-oh, I don't hear Leah or Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't hear them either.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there they are.
Now I hear them. Hello.
Hello.
What's your question?
Are there any hidden messages or objects in the illustrations in The Thief Who Stole Heaven as there were in The Spider Who Saved Christmas?
Oh, you are insightful. Who is this, Lindsay or Leah? I missed the name. I couldn't hear the name.
Yeah, I'm not sure
which one.
Well,
thank you for the question. You are a very insightful reader. I'll take it. There are a few, I call them Easter eggs, hidden in the illustrations here. Doug, if you could hand me the spider book.
Yeah,
in the spider book, there were, you know, Randy Gallegos and I working together wanted to find little things we could weave into the, no pun intended, weave into the illustration so that there was kind of an extra story happening there. And if you look here, this particular illustration, you see the spider and she's plucking the web to call her children out of the cave to help the baby Jesus. And if you look really closely at this web here, they're actual musical notes. And it's playing What Child Is This? It's Greensleeves. And of course, the child is that one right there. So that's one little example. There are many others here. And yes,
that's in the spider book.
That's in the spider book. But in the thief book, we did the same thing. We also have little Easter eggs. I'll share one with you. I don't want to ruin them all for you, but there's a neat one here. There's an illustration here where Dismas is being arrested, and you see Justice and Dismas up here, and they're being arrested for this crime. But if you look to the extreme right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see Jesus and St. Peter and the apostles there passing by. And that's sort of the background to what's really happening to Dismas throughout this book. He encounters grace, he encounters Christ in different forms, and even when he isn't looking for him, he's there. So there's those little touches throughout, and this book is really about mercy, about grace, and how it continues to the very end of a life. So,
and part of the fun is looking for those yourself.
Yeah, well,
right?
For the kids, it's a fun,
exactly,
fun
to be able to look for those as well.
The adults, I think, they'll get lost in the narrative.
Right.
For the kids, we wanted to give them things to search for and fun little tidbits.
Right, and again, we're here. It's The Thief Who Stole Heaven, the special book signing. We hope it'll work out. On the phone right now, Lydia and daughter Savannah from Virginia for Raymond Arroyo. Welcome. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. Arroyo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to hear you and your voice. What's your question?
How do you know the illustration is sync with the written words? Such as, when you write the story, does your mind visualize the pictures at the same time, or is there another process.
Wow. Savannah, you ask the best questions. How insightful of you. You asked, how do you know, how do you sync up the illustration with the written word? That is a process. When I write these stories, unlike the Will Wilder series or Mother Angelica's biography, those weren't picture books, so I didn't have, that strong sense of a visual idea as I wrote the story. Here, I do try to come up with, I told Doug earlier, it's almost like storyboarding a movie. When they lay out a movie, they have a page with little boxes, and they do rough sketches of what each shot will look like. I use a similar process here. I have 19 spreads or so, pages that I'm dealing with, and you have to narrow down what are you going to depict there, and it becomes kind of a puzzle because there are other things I'd like to say that I can't because I'm limited by the illustration, and then there are other things I can communicate in the illustration that I can't with the written word. So it's a balancing act. I work very closely with Randy Gallegos, who did all my illustrations here, but it's in some ways it's like we make television. You think about, okay, I'm doing this segment, how do I animate it? How do I draw the audience in? How do I excite them so they'll stay for the conversation to come? This is the same sort of activity. So in many ways, it's what I've been doing my whole life, telling stories with pictures and words. Right. So I balanced it out. It was very natural for me to do it. Now, I didn't sign Lindsay and Leia's book, which I will do in a second, but I'm going to sign Savannah. Is it Savannah Margaret Jenkins? Is that the whole name? Are you still there, Savannah?
That's the name that they gave us. Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to
so
make
we'll
this
use
one
that
out to Savannah, and I'll hold it up when we're done, Doug, just so Savannah can see it. But that was a great question. Thank you for it.
EWTNRC.com, 1-800-854-6316. Again, item number 2388A. And
that's Savannah's book. I just wanted to see it. We'll be sending this out to you, okay?
On the phone now, while you're writing that, Raymond, you're the multitasker of the world. We have Joy from Pennsylvania, who's going to call us for an autograph for Roger and Joy. Go ahead.
What's your question?
What drew you to St. Dismas, and what was it about him that made you decide to make him the main character of your second picture book?
I was working on thank you for the question, Joy. I was working on another project, and I stumbled across, it was in a big Bible concordance, those big, thick concordances. And in a footnote, under the flight to Egypt, there was a little note, and it said merely this: there is a story of Dismas the good thief encountering the Holy Family as they fled to Egypt. And I thought, what? What is this? Where's this from? Where did this story come from? So I started exploring it, and sure enough, St. Augustine, Gregory the Great, Peter Damian, and many others have written about the origin story of Dismas. And when I started pulling the threads together, I thought, first of all, I was kind of offended that nobody told me about this story, including any priests or my parents or anybody else, but it's because they've never heard it. So I thought, let me try to take this story, make it accessible for families, and as we move into Lent, into Easter, it becomes a moment of reflection, and I think an important conversation about the grace you miss along the way, and how it never really disappears. It never really leaves you. Mercy and that grace stays forever, to the very end, to the very last moment. And that's Dismas' story. Right. So that's what drew me to it. I just thought it was a great story. And there's a tie-in, Doug. There's a tie-in between this book and the last. Those who know The Spider Who Saved Christmas and are familiar with the illustrations will recognize in the early part of this book, Dismas, the good thief, comes in contact with a very familiar family. And I made sure that Randy Gallegos, who illustrated this, we wanted the family to look exactly as they did in The Spider Who Saved Christmas. So there's a neat tie-in. I see this in my head as happening just before they went into the cave and met the spider in the aforementioned title.
So it's a prequel sequel.
This is a prequel sequel, yeah.
Okay,
it's a prequel. Okay. And it ties it all in, and in some ways it deepens that story. So they don't have to be read together, but there's a feeling of continuity.
Clearly, the Holy Family had a lot of adventures on their way
They did.
to Egypt,
Look,
apparently.
But, you know, Mother Angelica used to say, and I think, the Bible itself has become, in all these stories, we take them for granted, and we think, oh, those are things that, you know, people in the past worried about. These are actually gripping adventure tales. They are adventures. I mean, whether it's Moses or King David going out, hiding from people who are trying to kill him, these are high-stakes adventures. One of the reviewers of the book said this is Aladdin meets The Chosen,
right.
which I might quibble a little bit, but I kind of like the general thrust of that, because he is a swashbuckling kind of guy on the road, carving out a life for himself, quite literally. Not in the best of ways. He makes some bad choices, but we see the redemptive arc of that character,
right.
and I like that idea.
Right. The Thief Who Stole Heaven is the title. EWTNRC.com, 1-800-854-6316. Item number, you can find it when you go to the website. And on the phone right now, because we want to keep things going, Sandra and Daniel from Texas calling in with an autograph for Haley. Go ahead, Sandra and Daniel.
Haley is our granddaughter she was born on the feast day of St. Dismas. So,
Oh, boy. Coming up, right? The 25th?
25th.
Is it the 25th?
25th,
Yeah.
right?
yeah. So, yes, and we do prison ministry. So one of the question I have for you is, do you have expectations of conversions occurring from people reading your book?
You know, that's a great question, and Sandra, I'm working actually now, and we've spoken to some pastors who work in prison ministry, because my first thought was to try to get the book in the hands of the children of prisoners, so that they could have their own conversation, because for them this story really hits home, because so many of these prisoners, as you know, working in prison ministry, people discard them and forget about them and say, well, they get what they deserve, when many times the prison becomes the vessel of conversion for these men and redemption. And so I think it's important to let kids know, and the prisoners understand themselves, that redemption's possible, and this could be the moment of redemption for them. I hope everybody will be touched by the book, because this story it's part of the Lenten and Good Friday narrative. It's far bigger than this book. All I'm trying to do is to give audiences a new way, a new on-ramp into a story that we take for granted and that we think we already know or understand.
Right. The Thief Who Stole Heaven, again, it's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com, 1-800-854-6316. 2388A is actually the item number. We make it really simple if you want to order the book, and you'll get an autographed copy. Well, I tell you, it must be because of Chris Edwards, but you're very popular in Texas here. It's on the phone, Virginia from Texas, who's looking for an autograph for Virginia. So go ahead, Virginia.
Hi, Raymond.
Hi, how are you, Virginia?
One New Orleanian to another.
Darling, I can hear that accent, sugar. I hear that accent from New Orleans. Can't mistake it, Virginia. Don't give me Texas. Where in Texas are you?
A College Station.
College Station? Oh, I know it well. I know it well.
Yes, from Katrina. I'm one of the refugees from Katrina.
Well, we sent our best out.
Raymond, I so enjoy you very much, your journalism, everything you do.
You're sweet.
I am interested in knowing what set you on this path to write such a beautiful, inspirational books. I mean, I just thought that I can't wait to read this one.
Oh,
and
thank you,
I
Virginia.
also get one for my cousin. I have no children, but also the artwork is so beautiful.
Oh, well,
I mean,
thank you.
Both books, I know.
Well,
the other thing is that Mother Angelica loved footnotes. So you better stick to reading those footnotes.
That's true. Mother did like those footnotes. She could spend an hour talking about a footnote at the bottom of the screen. I started down this path of writing for children when I had my own children. I noticed that there was a dearth of material for them, that we read through all the classics, and then you kind of run out of steam, and you don't quite know where to go. For my boys particularly, I noticed there was very few series for them. After Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, they're kind of left hanging. And there's a lot of printed material for girls, very little for boys. So I thought the Will Wilder series I created so that both boys and girls could enter it, and I got a lot of readers across the board. But, you know, it's a male protagonist. But, and that series has kind of taken on a life of its own. So that's how it started. Picture books came later when I saw multi-generations reading Will Wilder and sharing it together. I thought, what if we broaden this a bit? And the spider story lent itself to a picture book treatment. Not every story does. Not every story does. So you have to suit the story to the form. And in this case, and in the last book, it felt right. And you can imply things or draw the audience to conclusions without having to say it in a picture book.
Now,
I like that.
Got some great comments. Yeah,
Oh,
the
good.
Spider Who Saved Christmas, so excited to purchase this one.
Good.
The Ministry of Telling Stories, as you talk about. Also, Deirdre says, thanks, Raymond. I purchased both books for my daughters and for myself. Nick says, how much of the Venerable Maria Agrita's Mystical City of God influenced your book?
Ah, that's a great question.
That's an interesting question.
Agrita, Mary of Agrita also writes about Dismas and meeting the Holy Family. It affected me a little bit, but I relied mostly on Augustine, Peter Damian, because Mary of Agrita had visions. And I thought the other, so they get a little dramatic and free-flowing around the edges. So I kind of wanted to restrict myself to the record and what the church fathers had written about this thief. There are one or two dramatic flourishes of my own that I've inserted here, but not markedly. It doesn't change the story in any way. It's just one or two little dramatic moments that were needed to keep the narrative going or at a certain moment. And that's just telling the story.
We've got a phone call now. We've got Patricia from Connecticut with an autograph as well. Go ahead, Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
Thank you for doing this book.
Happy to do it. Delighted to do it.
Yeah, I enjoyed your spider book, too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's my husband's Ukrainian, and that is the Ukrainian legend.
That's correct. It's an Eastern European legend. And again, that was another story, Patricia. I came across this. I remember traveling in Ukraine at Christmas time, and the trees are covered with these jeweled spiders. And I thought, what is this? Is it Halloween decorations they forgot to take down? What is this? And it was everywhere. But I never asked the question. I just kind of noted it and filed it away. And then years later, I came across the legend. And I thought, again, why doesn't everyone know this story? It's such a cute, important story about the least among us having the most important role at the pivotal moment. It opened up the Christmas story to me. I thought it's a great tale. So I'm glad you got the book and liked it. And you're right, it's an old Ukrainian legend. Yeah.
I have two of those decorations for my tree.
I love it. Great. What's your question?
A question. How did you find enough material to do this book?
Well, it took a lot of digging, I have to tell you. And it wasn't readily, there were few books that sort of had everything. There were a couple of books on Dismas. One was a fictional account that was too, there was very little I could use there because they fabulated a lot of other adventures and things. So I had to go back, and I went back to many of the church fathers. Big, dense books. Librarians helped me a great deal. The internet helped a little bit. But I tracked it down, and I synthesized bits and pieces. St. Jerome, as I mentioned earlier, Augustine. Augustine was a great resource for this. And that's where the quote that Dismas repeats to the child Jesus came from. I took it right from Augustine.
On the phone right now, Valerie from North Carolina.
Hey.
Go ahead, Valerie.
Hello,
Valerie.
Raymond. Nice to talk to you.
How
I
are
never
you?
miss the world over.
Oh, you're very
let you know.
kind, and you must have a high tolerance for pain, Valerie, but that's nice.
Oh,
of you to say.
no. Very informative. I love the papal posse.
Thank you. My papal posse. People love the posse. I love them too. They're much more outspoken than they were in the earlier days, though, Valerie. If you watched from the beginning, they've found their edge.
Their voice.
Their voice, yeah.
Right, that's okay.
Go ahead,
Well,
Valerie.
that's
What's
good.
your
They've
question?
got their vibe.
They do.
Well, actually, you've answered quite a bit of what I was going to ask about researching the topic, and I just found it fascinating that the church fathers had written about St. Dismas, because you have unearthed a story that I've never thought about before, never heard before.
I never did either.
So I really appreciate that.
Well, it was hidden in bits and pieces all over the place. It was in homilies. Augustine had written a little bit, and it was in the middle of a treatise. So you'll find, clues about this guy. Gregory the Great says Dismas killed his brother. He was a ruthless killer. So he wasn't just some sweet guy who, did the occasional, pinching out of people's bags. No, he killed people to take their things. And so the ruthlessness of this character with where he ends his life, that duality I thought was important. And again, you can only go so far in a children's book, in a family read. So, I don't go into all those grisly details, but I will show you one little thing. There's an illustration here of the brother. He's never explained in the book, but if you look here, this guy cleaning the sword is his brother. I don't mention him in the narrative, but at the end I do mention that line from Gregory the Great where he says, he was guilty of killing his sibling. Right. So it's implied without being mentioned. So families can reference it if they want. If not, it kind of goes past the younger readers. And for Patricia, who we talked to earlier, there's your signed edition. Thank you, Patricia. We'll send this out to you.
Shannon from Idaho calling in to Raymond Arroyo. Go ahead, Shannon.
Hi, Raymond.
Hi, how are you, Shannon?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I had a question for you, if I might.
You might. Go ahead.
All right. Can you share with me what portion of the book is more factual than legend, and how you gathered your information for the book? Because I'm going to be reading it with my kiddos.
Yeah, that's a great question, Shannon. And I spend, in the author's note at the end, I note a lot of this. But it's mostly, I happen to believe that calling it a legend might be a little disingenuous, because I believe, after doing this research, that a lot of this is historical. But legends are historical. A legend is a bit of truth, a bit of history that over time people have fictionalized and added to or embellished. That's all a legend is. It's an embellished nugget of history. So I've tried to take that nugget out, which is why I didn't rely on Mary of Agreda and some of the visionaries who've had, they tell their own tales of Dismas. I tried to stick to the record. So for the most part, aside from one little moment, in the middle of the meeting with the Holy Family, I added that little moment, which is where, I won't tell you, but we know that Dismas encountered this Holy Family. I imagined what that encounter might have been like, but the words he says there are Augustine's words. It comes from St. Augustine.
And the book is The Thief Who Stole Heaven, EWTNRC.com. If you'd like to order a copy, you can go there and get an autographed copy, or call 1-800-854-6316, order item number 2388A, 2388A, and I guess tell them you want to make sure you get the autographed copy. We're all good. Thank you so much, Ray. It's always great to spend time with you.
And thank you all. My new picture book, The Thief Who Stole Heaven, is available at bookstores everywhere, online, at EWTN's catalog, where you can still find limited signed editions. You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. As always, visit discoverlegends.com or my website for more information.